Good morning, folks. Mr. Daldis here to come at you with the Chapter 11, Section 1 lecture. What we're going to do today is talk about the basics, also talk about how the geographical features, the climate change spurred on a bunch of movement around the continent of Africa. So what you're looking at here is a continent of Africa. This yellow area here is the Sahara Desert. Now, it is one of the largest deserts in the world. And is going to be the reason that a lot of people in Africa move from this area here to the south. Okay, going to be the reason why many people move from that area to the south. So where your predominance is people are going to be right about this area, and they're going to head south. They're also going to be working their way from Egypt, from the Somalia area, and everybody's going to basically be working their way south. Now, the reason for this is because this desert is going to grow. And that is going to cause people to want to move. So here's a timeline of events. What happens in Africa is along the top in the blue, and what was going on in the world, maybe some things that we've talked about as well that'll show up on the bottom. What you'll see here is, for example, the Black Death begins to ravage Europe. That happens about the same time Mansa Musa is making his Hajj or pilgrimage to Mecca. So just to kind of put things into perspective about events that we've talked about, and exploration and things that will happen down the road. So we're going to pick up with our discussion here on Chapter 11, Kingdoms and Trading States of Africa. This will be Section 1, Early Civilizations of Africa. Questions for you that you'd be able to answer by the end of this lecture is: how did geography affect cultural development and the migration of peoples? What were the achievements of the Kingdom of Nubia? And how did outside influences lead to change in North Africa? So here's a climate map of Africa, just to show you a quick breakdown. Africa has many climate zones and landforms, and what they have done is they have allowed for the development of very unique and a wide variety of cultures over the continent of Africa. What you guys will notice is that about 15 degrees north latitude is about this line, and you kind of see with this line, what you're seeing here, this line right here, is essentially everything north of that is going to be the Sahara Desert, right along the Tropic of Cancer. Is all going to be a desert climate, hence the yellow shade. Everything below that is going to be a combination of savanna, rainforest, dry woodland, and this is what people, as they start to move throughout the continent of Africa, this is what they're going to seek out, are these different grasslands, woodlands, to carve out a little slice of life for their family and their community. What I want to draw your attention to as well with this map is up along the top, you'll see a unique climate here that is orange. I just wanted to highlight it for you. That is the Mediterranean climate, and the reason it's called the Mediterranean climate, it's warm, it's a little bit of moisture in the air, and that is due to the fact of its location right here along the Mediterranean Sea. So you can only find that climate right on the very northern edges of Africa. So box 1 in your notes, these are some informational pieces that you need. So Africa's geographic influences. Vegetation affects where you live. It really does. The availability of food, so being able to grow food, have sustainable food sources for you and your family, it's going to affect how and where you live. And so what you're going to see is these climates are going to come into play, and it's going to affect how vegetation grows and what you can grow. So that is going to cause people to want to move around the continent of Africa. Great Rift Valley, the Mediterranean, Red Seas, these are going to promote trade and travel, which are going to bring people to the area. It's also going to encourage people to move maybe from the interior of Africa to the exterior, to the coasts, to be by those water sources. And now if you're following a river, eventually you will find a coast or a waterfall or a combination of the two. So resources are going to spur trade. The biggest resources among them are going to be salt and gold. Again, if you write one thing down for this section of the textbook and something to remember for the test, is that gold and salt are going to be your heavy hitters. Okay, gold and salt. These are your heavy hitters. These are the most important items in African history. It's what's going to draw people to Africa, and it's just going to make the people's lives in Africa vastly different depending on where you live. Some of the other things they talk about are iron, copper, brass, bronze. Those are going to bring wealth, but nothing compares to salt and gold. And what's going to drive this trade? It's going to be camels. And camels aren't even native to Africa. No, they're from Asia. But they're going to be built for the desert, and it's going to help trade and travel throughout this time period. So the Bantu migration is what it's called when people start to move, is this whole migration period, about 500 BC to about 1500 CE, which would be Common Era, formerly known as AD. So over the course of about 2,000 years, you're going to see people move all over the interior of Africa. And what you'll notice is they're going to move from an area due to desertification, which means that the Sahara Desert is going to grow, and it's going to force people out, and they are going to move south in search of savannas, in search of woodlands, to be able to provide for their family and community. So over thousands of years, migration has contributed to the rich diversity of people and cultures in Africa. So because of this whole desertification process, people had to move. It's going to create new cultures, new societies. The reason it's called the Bantu migration is because that is the base language that was spoken by the people that lived in this area here before they started to migrate. Bantu is a common language. Now, as people move from different areas of the continent, they're going to speak different languages. They're going to develop their own languages, different communities. However, Bantu is going to be that base language that gets spoken. So here's just some information for you. For box 2, people and ideas migrate. The Sahara is going to dry out. It used to be covered in water, and it was a beautiful savanna, grassland, gorgeous. But as the Sahara dries out, farmers need to cultivate areas that will allow them to grow crops. So farming is going to spread, and as farming spread, climate change occurs. Okay, the land becomes parched. The desert is going to spread like crazy. Desertification is going to occur. And it's going to chew up all the farmland and pasture that Africa had to offer. So people are going to be forced to live in new areas. The Bantu migration allows for people to move around. However, there are going to be barriers that they run into, geographic in nature. So you're looking at cataracts, waterfalls. You're looking at vast open areas. And so like just that whole movement wasn't necessarily as easy, just due to some of the barriers that existed. And as we said, the base language spoken was Bantu, which gave the movement its name. You can still find the influence of Bantu speakers today, by the way, and a lot of languages spoken in Central and Southern Africa. Bantu is kind of that base language that connects all those languages together. So here we're looking at different migration patterns, and again, what you will look at are these different areas. So they lived here north of the Niger River by the Hagar Mountains. It's just south of the Atlas Mountains here, and they are going to move south to where the climate is different, more welcoming and conducive for growing, farming, and herding. So Nubia is one of the kingdoms that's going to grow out of this time period of movement and culture change. It's going to be located right by Egypt and Cairo in particular. And so this kingdom, by way of proxy, just being close to the empire of Egypt, they are going to adopt many Egyptian traditions. However, they are going to worship their own god, and their artistic styles are going to reflect the sense of freedom that Africans felt during this time, Nubians in particular. They're going to establish a capital at Meroe. And Meroe was located in a prime spot that was right where the north-south trade routes connected and the east-west trade routes connected. So it's really in a nice spot for growth. Nubians are going to create their own system of writing. The unfortunate piece with that is that that writing is going to be lost to time. They were not able to translate the symbols and letters of the Nubian system of writing, and so it has kind of becoming a lost language. Meroe had a booming iron industry, lots of iron ore deposits right there, and so what's going to happen is they're going to build a great big industry around iron. So tools, weapons, things like that. And when you have new weapons, as we've talked about before, typically you're able to expand. Now, Nubia is going to see a relative rise in success, a relative amount of success, especially against the Egyptians for a time. But as is the case with all great empires, it's going to rise, it's going to plateau, and then eventually it's going to fall, which is going to lead to the rise of Axum. And we'll talk about that more later. Just want to compare and contrast to show the influence that Egypt had on the Nubians. And on the left here, you will see one of the Great Pyramids of Giza located in Egypt. And on the right, you will see one of the Great Nubian Pyramids. As you can tell, not nearly as big, not nearly as grand as the ancient Egyptian ones, but still you see that influence, that pyramid shape is definitely evident. So box 3, continuing our talk with Nubia here. Nubia is going to flourish along the Nile. They're going to rival Egypt for control. Now remember, there's a lot of great land, a lot of good soil right along the Nile River, and that is going to be needed to farm. So Nubia is going to try to carve out a path by taking on Egypt. So Egypt begins control of the area in about 1500 BC, and it's going to last for almost 500 years. So the Egyptians knew what they were doing. The Nubians, however, they're going to move capital to Meroe, which is located close to some waterways. Great center for trade. The biggest resource that they're going to have, the Nubians, is going to be iron ore and timber. When you have both of those items, you can make tools and weapons, because that's what weapons are made out of back in the day, wood and iron ore. So North Africa, I believe this is box 4. Yep, box 4, looking at North Africa. So warfare and trade are going to carry. That is the case anytime that you have resources available to you. People are going to want to fight over those. But you're going to start to see an increase in outside influences, mainly from the Romans. The Romans are going to move into North Africa. With them is going to come Christianity. With them is going to come roads and dams and aqueducts and cities. And they spread out very, very quickly. Camels are going to make their way from Asia. They're brought in from Asia to help with trade across the Sahara. Without those camels, it would have been very difficult for some of these kingdoms to develop. So that lasted, that Roman rule is going to last up until about the 600s, when the Muslims or Arab armies come in to North Africa, and they're going to push the Christians out. So Islam is going to replace Christianity and become the dominant religion of the region. Then, of course, as is the case with all Muslim civilizations, Arabic is going to become the primary language, and everybody's going to learn how to read and write so they can study the Quran. So North Africa is going to experience some of that growth and expansion that we talked about during the Muslim empires. This is just a recap of what we just mentioned. And here is your Section 1 assessment. So just take a minute and take a guess as to what these questions may be. North Africa was primarily which climate? And then which industry thrived in Nubia? Take a minute, pause the video, make your guesses, and then we will go on to the answers. If you guessed desert for the first one and ironworking for the second one, you are correct, and you are already on your way to finding success with the Unit 3 test. So folks, that is all I have for Section 1. I hope you will email me if you have any questions or concerns. Make sure those notes are filled in and that you turn them in Google Classroom. Thanks, guys. Have a great day.